To the Stomp the Bus show. I am your host, Mark Harris, coming at you with episode 25, our first of the new year in January 2023. We're just off the national championship game last night, so the off season has officially begun for every team, even though it's begun. And we've got a lot of interesting stuff to get to, more transfer portal, some scheduling stuff that we didn't expect. But Colton, before we get into anything, I have one question to ask you.
Shoot, Mark.
Yeah. So if someone put a gun to your head, and that's the end of the question. No.
Good start.
Yeah. If someone put a gun to your head and said ASU football will have the equivalent type of season as TCU in 2023, meaning they go 11-1, or they finish 12-1 in the regular season because TCU went 12-0, then lost in the championship game. Let's just say 12-1, win the Pac-12, and then you win a playoff game, but you get blown out in the championship game. Would you take it?
Okay, wait. So is it like a retroactive in my head where the gun is to my head and I make my choice, and then if I'm wrong, they like come back? Or
Okay. I shouldn't have said gun to your head because that implies
okay. The scenario just confused me a little bit.
But yeah, I messed that up. But
no, that's okay. Are you asking me, would I take a TCU season, like a parallel season to the season TCU just had for ASU next year?
Even though you get blown out in the national championship game?
100%.
Okay.
Mark, what kind of a question is that? I thought
I don't think everyone would. I don't think everyone would take that.
I don't care if ASU loses 120-0 in the national championship. They got to the national championship.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of. I thought you were going to ask me if it was like, because I started thinking about it, and I'm like, what was TCU's outlook in the preseason last year? And I know they were heavy underdogs to even be in the conversation. I don't know what their Big 12 outlook was or anything like that off the top of my head.
It wasn't that great.
Yeah,
they went 5-7 last year.
Okay, because I'm not a devout Horned Frogs follower by any means, so I wasn't entirely sure. However, to answer your ridiculous question, Mark, that you fumbled so thoroughly, absolutely. And it is great to be back with you in 2023. I decided this new year I'm going to become a professional podcaster. And that's why you see the mic. I'm turning over a new leaf. I decided that I was going to emphasize sound quality in this newest iteration of the Stomp the Bus podcast. So you're welcome, loyal listeners.
You're doing a good job. Yeah, no, I mean, it would suck to get, like, if you're a TCU fan, like, today sucks, but the rest of, like, the offseason's like, okay, we made it to the national championship game, you know?
But your day didn't suck until the last possible day that could suck.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and it's like TCU got literally everything out that they could have possibly done this season, you know?
Correct. I'm trying to fix this.
But the reason I make the TCU comp for ASU is because they'll have a lot of the same elements heading into this upcoming season. You know, bad season the year before, new offensive head coach. Granted, Sonny Dykes has a lot more experience than Dillingham, so that is a huge caveat.
Yeah. Can you hear me real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because the mic wasn't even working, so I did this big spiel about how I'm going to be a professional podcaster. But the road to become a professional podcaster is paved with lessons. And this is my first one.
Right.
So now you should hear, that was very heavy, but you should hear audio quality unlike anything you've ever experienced. I'm so sorry to rudely cut you off, Mark, with all this technical jargon, but go ahead.
I get it. I mean, this is the avatar of ASU football podcasts. Like, let's be honest.
Yes.
We have James Cameron in the background helping us out. So,
yep, and we're doing this until 2028, much like James Cameron.
Oh my God. Did you see that movie? I didn't
I
even.
haven't yet, but I've heard great things, and I loved the first one. Um, so I need to go check it out. But movies are so long now, um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I gotta get out and see it eventually. Yeah. Have you seen it?
Oh, no. I don't really have any
Oh,
plans on it, but
Mark.
anyway,
Whatever,
this is
man.
not a Way of Water review podcast. No, I just wanted to start the show off like that with a poorly worded question. I should have said, "Would you
The
rather?" But
No, but the pieces were there. I understood what you were saying. I've already given you enough flack for how terrible you asked that question. So now I just have to give you the credit for asking it. It was a good question, and 100% yes, I would take that
yeah,
season.
yeah, same. And people, so this is just an own personal little thing. People are like, "Oh, TCU didn't deserve to be there," and it's like they beat Michigan to get there.
Yeah,
Like, there's like I don't really know like what like this isn't like the BCS where like if let's just say the Big Ten champ had one loss and TCU had won the Big 12 championship game, then you could have made kind of an argument, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, Georgia, like they're a machine. It's just kind of crazy.
yeah, they were just way better than everybody. I mean, and Ohio
Well,
State almost
yeah,
beat them.
everyone but Ohio State they were way better than. But
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. But what's crazy about this system too is that one game, and I felt very uneasy about that Michigan Ohio State game because I felt like, and obviously it didn't end up being this way, but Ohio State was kind of on the fringes, obviously, because they didn't play in a conference championship or anything like that. When it came to picking the field for the college football playoff,
yeah,
Ohio State wasn't a lock to even get in.
no,
But for most of this season, if not all of this season, Ohio State and Georgia were 1A and 1B in my mind. And it
yeah,
showed in that college football semifinal. Every time I watched Ohio State play football, they looked incredible. And it just wouldn't have been right to leave them out. So I'm glad that they got in. But I think it would have been a huge disservice if anybody other than Ohio State got in. I just it put such a bad taste in my mouth, that game against that Ohio State Michigan game. Did you watch that game?
I watched some of it. Yeah, but
It was such an outlier for Ohio State, but I'm glad it ended up working out. I'm glad Ohio State got in. They were the one of the best teams in the country, so and they proved it.
well,
Um,
it's funny because if US like it was totally out of Ohio State's control too,
yeah,
because
yeah. If USC,
if
I
USC
completely
had beaten
forgot about
Utah
that.
in the Pac-12 championship game, it would have been Georgia just would have killed USC. But
Yeah,
uh,
that's a good point. I forgot it came down to the Pac-12 title game. But it worked out the way that it should have. I
yeah,
mean, it was just a very unfortunate game. That game was in Columbus too, right? I believe
yeah,
they played in
yeah,
Columbus. Yeah, JJ McCarthy just had the game of his life. I hadn't seen that dude throw deeper than 20 yards all season, and
yeah,
like 3 of his touchdown passes were from 60 yards or deeper. Just unreal. Either way, Ohio State got there. That Georgia, that's the one thing I will say, regardless of what happened with Georgia and TCU, the semifinal games were some of the best I've seen
yep,
in this college football playoff era. And if we're going to get more of those with an extended playoff field, I mean,
right.
the SEC is the SEC. If you get to the final and the SEC is just extremely or just well beyond where everybody else is, at least you got some really compelling football along the way, which is what
Yeah,
it's all about, I think.
yeah, and we'll kind of wrap up the national championship talk, but I don't think anyone like there's really only like maybe four programs that can win the national championship. It feels like it's Georgia, Bama, LSU. I think LSU's capable just because they can recruit so well, and Ohio State. And like that kind of feels like it's it right now. I mean, I feel like it's going to be tough for another Clemson to come around.
I
Um,
think Florida State is very close.
Florida
I
State,
saw I saw a
Florida
poll
State could be really good.
ranking them as like third in a way too early or whatever they do, like right
Yeah.
after the championship game. And I saw Florida State ranked third by somebody. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. They had a really good season this year. I think Jordan Travis is coming back too. Third
But
year of Mike Norvell.
we've seen teams. I think the thing is like we've seen teams like Oklahoma be rated that high, but like I wouldn't put Oklahoma on any of those other teams' levels. Like, and that's kind of how I feel about Florida State. Like, they're kind of in the same like second tier, really good teams, but to
Yeah,
actually win it
they could
all,
contend for a spot in the field at the very
oh, for
least.
sure, yeah,
Yeah, that's I mean in the ACC definitely. I'd be interested to see what the odds are going to look like with Clemson and Florida State. Be a good race in the ACC next year.
right. Well, anyway, there was one thing in the national championship game that applied to ASU, and it came late in the
I was
fourth
going to say
quarter.
the Ant-Man trailer.
The what? Oh,
That was the most compelling part. The Ant-Man trailer.
yeah. But anyway, as it relates to ASU, late in the game when Georgia was just absolutely extending the lead and just kind of running out the clock, they'd start talking about Deion Sanders in Colorado because that's what you do in college football if you don't have anything else to talk about right now. But they talk about that and they're saying, oh, Colorado's going to play TCU to open the year. And then Herb Street goes, well, actually, the Pac-12 is trying to reschedule Colorado scheduled so they play ASU to open the season, and that kind of floored me yesterday because it was originally scheduled for ASU to play Colorado in the middle of the season. So just without knowing kind of some of the other details, like what do you think of ASU opening the season against Colorado now potentially?
I think it's extremely interesting, and I think the fact that ASU is the team that they're targeting to play this game means that at the very least we're on the minds of the national audience a little bit because of what Kenny Dillingham is doing. I think. I mean, Deion Sanders is probably obviously one of the most compelling stories in college football right now. So de facto, probably the most interesting story in the Pac-12.
Oh,
So you're going to want to
100%.
spotlight him a little bit. And I think it's really good for ASU to get that exposure right out of the gate. It's definitely not a bad thing. It's hard to speculate on what it's going to look like. Colorado was obviously abysmal last season. I mean, it would be sort of silly to get into results or predictions or anything like that right
Right.
now in terms of just outlook for the programs. Anytime you're going to share the field with a program that is going to be as heavily discussed as Colorado, it's a really good thing for your program's exposure. Um, and I mean, playing a week 0 game is also a pretty good thing. I'm trying to think. So
Yeah.
like
So for those who don't know,
week one would have been Northern Arizona, right? That wasn't a week 0 game.
are you talking about this past year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah. That was
ASU.
week
So
one.
they opened against NAU. That was week
The
one.
week
So to even
zero,
play a week 0 game it shows that this program is starting to become a little more notable.
right. Well, the week zero game last year that was notable was Northwestern Nebraska in Ireland, if you remember that game. And it
Yeah.
was kind of just like a little preview into, hey, college football's almost here. And then they also had like some, I think Hawaii always plays that weekend or something, like kind of just smaller level games. But yeah, so for those of you who don't know, it's supposed to be in week zero. And as we know right now, it's supposed to be in Arizona. So, like, are they going to have it in Glendale? Are they going to have it at Sun Devil Stadium? Like, it's crazy. And so this isn't a national audience. Well, I don't know all the details behind it, but I'm reading an article from 20 24/7 Sports, and it says the Pac-12 is working to finalize a week 0 matchup between ASU and Colorado. So they would obviously have to get it televised. So I guess they have ASU in from that perspective. But this sounds like it's the Pac-12 trying to be like, hey, we want to claim week 0, which I think is smart. Like this is Larry Scott would have never even thought of this, because he didn't
Definitely.
care about any of like anything to like on the edges of football to help the conference out. He didn't really think about or care about, it seems like. Where Klavkov is an innovative idea, and to have Colorado as part of it is going to be super interesting. But what do you think about the potential like location of this game within the Valley?
It's interesting, and that's what I'm thinking about. I'm kind of reading through some of these replies, and it looks like Brandon Marcello is who tweeted this out.
Yep.
Um, Somebody asks, "Do you think it'll be a neutral site?" And he says it's at Arizona State, but it doesn't really make sense with the time of year. I don't know why Colorado would come to Tempe to play at the end of August in a week 0 game. It's going to be like 110 degrees
Yeah.
outside. It would make sense to maybe. What's interesting to me, and I don't know how practical it is. Obviously, this is something for, the decision makers. Maybe there's something in the works as far as this goes, but like Cardinal Stadium, or was it called now? State Farm Stadium?
Yeah.
Is that what we? Yeah, State Farm Stadium might be interesting. Obviously, it's an indoor venue. Again, I don't know how practical it is. But
Right.
that would seem to make sense. That's the only element of this that I'm kind of lost on, is
Yeah.
why Colorado would agree to come play at the end of August, open their season at Arizona State. It would make more sense to be a neutral site, but this could be a
Well, this was
semi-neutral
an
site.
ASU home game originally later in the year. So ASU's not going to give up the home game.
Oh, so
Yeah.
they're just moving this game up to week 0.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So I mean, maybe they will then. Maybe they'll do that, or maybe ASU will work on some sort of indoor venue. I don't know what's going to happen. Either way, playing week 0 is a step in the right direction in terms of notoriety for this program, and playing against Deion Sanders takes that even a step further. So no complaints about this. I'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of the venue. Are they going to keep this game at Arizona State? Is that already locked in? I feel like that's the one part of this that I'm a little confused on, and maybe there's people that know more than me. I'm typically not the smartest person in the room when it comes to these things. So yeah, that's the part of this I'll be keeping an eye on. But really cool news. I'm excited for that game.
Yeah. No, and one thing that just kind of popped in my head as we're talking about this in regards to possibly having it in Glendale is, what does the Cardinals preseason look like? Because
Yeah.
they might need that. What it might fall on that weekend.
Yeah,
Like
and I don't even
in the
think that
NFL.
schedule's
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
in the NFL, they're talking about a place for where the Bills and Chiefs could potentially play, and they want to do the Colts, but they had something in town. So like these arenas get booked like way in advance for concerts and events and whatever it may be. But that's a big monkey wrench in this. So it makes me think that this game will be in Tempe,
Yeah.
for week 0.
No, that's a great point. I was gonna say also, I mean, that schedule for the NFL doesn't really come out until March. Right now, they've just kind of released
Oh,
opponents, and the preseason stuff will come out in March. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting. It seems like right now, if I had to do a quick callback to your incredible question from earlier, if there was a gun to my head, I would say this game is played in Tempe.
yeah, that makes sense. And man, it's always hot, in August in
Yeah.
Tempe.
I mean, you
Um,
can push it. You can push it to an 8 p.m. kickoff, which I'm sure they will anyway. But it's
it would
still going to
definitely be
be,
a later game. I mean, it would have to be.
yeah, it's still going to be 95 to 100 at kickoff, something like
Yeah.
that.
No, I know. Well, I guess the one thing I would say though is that ASU has played games like at the end of August all the time to open their season. Now, granted, it's usually like against NAU, or this year was supposed to be Southern Utah on August 31st. And so, is the weather really that different, between August 25th and or whatever it may be, August 24th, and or like first day of September, late August? Like, not really. It's still really hot. So I mean, they have played late games, or like games in really hot weather at Sun Devil Stadium before.
Yeah, maybe the weather is more of a factor. I was just, or less of a factor. I mean, than we're making it out to be. I was just confused at why Dion would agree to move that up if you're going to get
Yeah.
ASU in October or November, whenever that
No.
game was scheduled for originally.
Yeah. No. I can't wait till we know the reporting of the dynamics of how this came to be, because it's just interesting. You don't usually reschedule conference games like that. Uh, I
Yeah,
again, I think it's
it's not even finalized yet, right?
No, it hasn't. I
Okay.
mean, as of when we're recording on Tuesday night, it has not been finalized.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is you mentioned, I mean, it would have to be a late game, right? But like if it's late for Arizona, that means it's going to come on even later for the rest of the country. So
Yeah. So how
that's
much of
maybe, yeah, so maybe they will have it in Glendale so they can have it like more in the middle of the day, you know, because they're doing this for TV.
yeah, if exactly. If the priority of week 0 is that exposure, there's not a ton of games on. There's however many games on right now. You can only watch a couple. They're all televised, whatever it is. That's usually the goal for a week 0 game, is it not?
100%. That's, yeah,
Yeah, so it wouldn't make sense to push this game back to 8 p.m. You're not going to get any East Coast viewership that way. But at the same, so like that leads me to believe that they would have to do it at a neutral venue in Arizona. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what comes out when this is finalized and what they're leaning toward in terms of a venue. Um, Either
do it
way,
at the
week
Sky Dome in
0.
Flagstaff.
There you go. There you go.
That'd be
Head up to the
sweet.
high country.
Yeah. But then Colorado would have the advantage of
Yeah,
playing
they
in
get the
location.
altitude.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a Dion special right there. Somehow trick ASU into playing in the altitude.
In the NAU Sky Dome. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, now that we're just talking this out, like I've flipped back and forth just in this conversation of like, is it going to be at Sun Devil Stadium or is it going to be, in Glendale where the Cardinals play? Especially since you mentioned the process of how they schedule the preseason games. It's just, I don't know. It's just so this doesn't happen at all in college football. Like usually the schedule is just set and that's what it is, save for the COVID season.
Yeah, definitely. I think like right now, obviously, is probably when, or it probably doesn't happen until after the Super Bowl. Probably like mid to late February is when they really start to get the ball rolling on the schedule permutations and what that the
Right.
schedules are going to look like and preseason schedules and all of that. So I would think maybe if that's a route that they're interested in going, if they finalize this week 0 game, coordinating and having the Cardinals play an away game the week of an away
Right.
preseason game rather the week of that week 0 game obviously is the way to go. It's just a matter of coordinating that while they're finalizing their schedule. But it's interesting, man. It would be really cool for ASU to play at State
No,
Farm
I'm
Stadium.
yeah, I'm excited, man. Like that would
Yeah,
be
that's really cool.
for it to be Dion, like for it to be Colorado in game 1 of the Dillingham era. And Dillingham would have a bunch of cool stuff schemed up. Like this dude gets really creative. And if you
Yeah.
guys can watch some of Oregon, but that would be an interesting element to it. As you were talking, I was just thinking, what if they have it at Chase Field?
Hmm.
They just had a bowl game there. I mean, maybe they wouldn't want to
Yeah.
f up. They
Yeah, I
wouldn't.
don't
They
know
probably
if
wouldn't want to f up the field though during the Diamondback season.
Oh yeah, because the Diamondbacks are in the heart of their season. They wouldn't be able to, or I guess the tail end. But well, no, I mean the Diamondbacks are going to be a playoff team next year, so they're not gonna want to throw anything off over there. But interesting thought there, Mark.
Yeah. Well, like I just don't. And also, like like August week 0 range, like that's still kind of monsoon season too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You play outside, a monsoon rolls in, and week zero's delayed by an hour and a half.
Delayed by like 4 hours because a
Kickoff
torrential
at
storm
10
falls.
p.m. Kickoff at 10 p.m. West Coast time. You get that exposure you really wanted. Um,
That would be the most Pac-12 thing to happen is like
yeah,
they schedule it at like whatever. What would be the most optimized time for Sun getting some East Coast at West? Like let's say like 6 p.m. Arizona time starts at 9, and then a freaking monsoon
yeah,
rolls in for like 4 hours.
yeah.
The
You'd want to
field gets
avoid that.
flooded.
You'd want to avoid that if all possible. That would be a very ominous sign for the start of the Kenny Dillingham, Drew Pine era.
Right. Right. Oh man. Well, I'm glad whoever thought of this, thank you because it just makes
I'm
everything a
sure
little
they're
bit,
listening.
yeah, of course they are. Why would they not be? It just makes everything a little bit more interesting. Um I was like, when Herb Street said it on the air last night, I was like, what? Like, did I hear something wrong? And
I didn't
then,
even hear him say that. I must have turned
yeah,
it off or something. I
I don't,
must have been in the other room or something.
I don't blame you for turning it off, but
Yeah, that's crazy. Once that over hit, I was out.
yeah,
That was a sweat. That was a sweat fest. If like I've ever been a part of one. Watching TCU stall and stall and stall, and then Georgia bringing their back up, and it's like, when are they going to stop scoring points? And then they pull
it's
it off.
yeah,
Georgia,
that was
I'm pretty sure Georgia floated that over on their own. The total was
it
61 and a
did.
half. They scored
Yeah,
65.
no, it's just yeah, that was tough, but I mean, it's just I can't wait. Like that just adds so much more intrigue to the season. You start out with Colorado and Dion, like, and by the way, like that might be because they're going to be pretty good, Colorado. Like they're not going to be like probably not contending for the conference, but neither will ASU. Like I think pretty good in terms of like 7-5, 8-4 type range for Colorado, but like because they already got in Travis Hunter. They might get this kid Cormani McLean, who's like the best corner in the country from Florida, just completely at the end of his commitment. But um, this might be a better chance for ASU to win. If like Dion and his staff are a little bit more accustomed to like a Power Five football midway through the season. I mean, maybe it helps Dion more because this is Dillingham's first game as a head coach. So you can make the argument both ways.
Yeah, definitely. It's Colorado is going solely off of the recruits and the notoriety that Dion is going to bring to that program. Colorado is going to be very prominent sooner rather than later. Not from a results standpoint, not
Oh,
just oh, look, it's Deion Sanders in Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be a pretty good team here pretty
yeah. Oh,
quickly.
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
Like, and ASU, like, I don't think there's a lot of resentment of ASU fans against Colorado. I've seen a little bit of it, but like, he's going to bring in talent. And so we can all debate on how good of an X's and O's coach he is. But like, ultimately, that's the name of the game is talent acquisition. So, and Dion has a very unmatched way of doing that, honestly. Like, Colorado was the worst Power Five program last year, un, undebated, undoubtedly. Couldn't even say the word, but just clearly the worst. And now they're getting in all these guys. So I think all of that like energy makes it such an intriguing matchup too. Because I think people are going to want to see what Colorado looks like too. You know,
definitely.
especially.
Definitely.
And one thing I just literally just thought of, like, if this is at Sun Devil Stadium, this is a great way to draw in the casual fan of ASU football. You know, you have Oklahoma State coming to town. Like, okay, that's cool. You have Colorado and Dion coming to town. Yeah, I'll check that out. So added
Yeah, I'm
benefit.
sure they would have rather checked that out in October or November.
That's
But they'll
true.
check it
Yeah,
out nonetheless.
yeah. Just wear a tank top.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does
Mark,
get
you're a
better at
big tank
night,
guy,
but
right?
what?
You're a big tank guy, right?
Eh,
You ever
in the
rock a
house.
sleeveless?
In the
Ooh, in the
house.
house. Wow,
Maybe
Mark.
occasion outside, depending on the event.
So tanks
But
tanks are a behind closed doors type of fit for you.
for the most part, I don't think
Respect.
people want to see my arms. So
Yeah. No, I didn't know that headband was a new thing you were doing. I don't know
oh,
if I've
I
ever seen you with the headband.
really
Yeah,
I wear this all the time.
is that like a Corey Kispert sweatband? What is that?
Gorgeous. I'm surprised. I did not expect that name to be brought up.
There you
No,
go.
it's just something to keep the hair out of my face.
Okay. Respect. Well, there's hair on your face. Did you know that?
Yeah, I do. Out
Okay.
of my eyes, I guess. How's
Oh,
that?
okay.
I don't have any hair on my eyes, so
The one part of your face you're trying to preserve. I respect it.
yeah. Well, I think we can both agree that that is a really awesome way for ASU to start the season. I'd like to get into some of the players that could potentially be playing in that game coming up next. We talked a lot about the transfer portal guys coming in last episode, and there's been more and more guys coming in. We've had some guys leave, which we'll get to, but just the most recent news, Keyshawn, you know what? This guy doesn't even have, oh, it's, hold on. Shamari Simmons. He was at Austin P, safety coming in, and again, it's another example of maybe not the biggest name, but just filling spots on the roster. Because I think this guy was like all conference in whatever league it was, and more guys like that. I just bring him up because he committed today. But the guy I wanted to talk about the most, this happened, I think it was the day after Christmas, was offensive tackle from Oregon, Bram Walden, commits to transfer to ASU. And what's important about him is it is difficult. Like all of these teams, they want defensive and offensive linemen in the portal because those guys, there's just so much fewer of those guys, And so for ASU to get Bram Walden, he was a 4-star recruit from Saguaro, I think 2 years ago. I think it's just huge. And just to get another potential big body on the offensive line is just so important.
Absolutely. Adding to that class of 24 current transfer commits for the class of 2023. If you're looking at the 2023 transfer rankings, you've got Colorado at number 2, USC at number 6, ASU at number 7, UCLA at number 8. So there's 4, and then Washington at 12. There's 5 Pac-12 teams in the top 12 of transfer rankings, which is pretty big. Huge for ASU. I was looking at sort of their composite ranking in terms of recruiting as well. I know that at the tail end of the Herm era, they were somewhere in the hundreds, right?
Yes.
In terms of the rank of their recruiting class.
You had to scroll through 24/7 Sports. They do the top 50 and then the next 50. You had to scroll through twice to get to ASU, a Power 5 program.
Yeah. And this makes sense. Looking at this, the 65th in composite rank, right? Which is that strictly recruiting class, like kids you're recruiting, or is that your total class? Like I think overall is the total class, like transfers and recruits, right?
Right.
Okay, so composite must be just recruits. Okay. So I mean that would make sense just looking at these numbers. You're not going to get a ton of for a program that's still under investigation, which is also very special. The fact that Dillingham comes in, does all of these things, and the investigation is kind of an afterthought. Like you're not even really thinking about the investigation anymore. But this is exactly what you had to do as the head coach of a team that maybe younger recruits are going to be a little nervous about committing to with 4 years ahead of them or 5, whatever it is now. But going out and hitting the transfer portal as hard as ASU has is a great sign. And obviously jumping that recruiting class from the hundreds to 45th overall.
Yeah.
Is pretty special.
Huge.
It's pretty special. Yeah.
And I just want to run through some of the guys we missed because ASU did have some. We'll talk about some of the guys who left too, but they did bring in some guys that are going to help plug those holes. So they bring in wide receiver Xavier Guillory. And before I go any further, I'm going to pronounce some of these guys' names wrong. That's just how it is. I don't have pronunciations next to me, but Xavier Guillory comes from Idaho State, Charlie Regal connection. You think, oh, Idaho State, no big deal. But I think this guy had like 800 yards receiving, and Utah wanted him too. So you beat out a rival who wants him, Then we bring in Leaf Fautanu, interior offensive line from UNLV. He was a starter there. Another big body to have. Love it. Bram Walden, we talked about. 4-star recruit out of high school. Was at Oregon with Dillingham. Great pickup. This next guy, I didn't know who he was. Samuel Benjamin, defensive lineman, Idaho State, 6'5", 260. Big frame. Hopefully it works out. He's going to be playing much higher level of football now, but better than nothing. Then you get 2 guys who were at Texas at one point. Safety Xavier Alford, who I think he was at Texas and then went to USC. I could be wrong, but he was last at USC. They list he 4-star out of high school. Wide receiver Troy Omire, also 4-star out of high school, was at Texas, transfers to ASU. Deshaun Mallory, defensive lineman from Michigan State, 6'5", 310. I think he's like a fifth-year guy. Another big body to have, very important. Shamari Simmons, we already talked about, comes in today from Austin P. And then maybe maybe the most important transfer pickup, or maybe top 5, is getting Dario Longhetto, kicker from Cal. And I bring that up because Jace Feely transferred before. He's actually transferred to Colorado, but Carter Brown transferred. And that was the
I
one,
saw
I
that.
think, based on how ASU fans reacted to guys leaving, that was kind of the one guy that fans were like the most confused about. He's going to Cincinnati with Emory Jones and DJ Taylor. So Sun Devils East out there. But getting Longhetto, honestly, I haven't looked into his stats. I remember him being solid at Cal. So, but important to have an experienced kicker.
Yeah, definitely. You need a kicker on the roster, right? And this
It helps.
satisfies that requirement. Hopefully he'll come out and kick effectively.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Well,
that's I guess all
the other thing
about
is,
the kicking competition, which I'm sure. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's good that you pick up someone who's like played Power 5 football, and I think we got
definitely.
his long snapper from Cal as well. So having that continuity is always very good. But is there anything else that stood out to you in the kind of the recent transfers that I just mentioned, other than Longhetto?
Um, Definitely looking through. There was one guy, Fatano, just like you, Mark. I'm gonna
Yeah,
botch this, but actually improved upon coming out of high school. He seems like he's on an upward trajectory. I'm excited to see what he does on the interior of the offensive line. Bram Walden's obviously going to be huge as well for that O line. Yeah, I'm just excited to see what these guys do once they get into the system and start playing. Drew Pine, I'm obviously excited about. 4-star out of high school, dropped to an 88 composite transfer from Notre Dame. So with Pine and Dillingham, obviously not Pine, but Dillingham's track record is, I guess, based off of last year. And he's worked with some pretty prominent quarterbacks as well at other stops, right? I think he was with Brady White. Wasn't he with Jordan Travis too? He
Brady
was
White. Oh
Brady
yeah,
White
yeah, Brady
at
White. Yep,
Memphis.
Jordan Travis. Yep.
Jordan Travis at Florida State. He's worked with some pretty solid quarterbacks. So I'm really excited to see what happens with this Drew Pine Dillingham combination, to see if Dillingham can really tap into what Pine does well. I mean, you've seen that, right? You've seen that with quarterbacks all over the place at every level. If you put them in the right system, they're
Yep.
going to look like world beaters. Like, look what's happening with Brock Purdy. Obviously, that's the obvious example in the NFL. I think Stetson Bennett is obviously a pretty prominent example of that too, and what we've seen over
Kind
the
of.
last
I'll
2 years.
disagree with you a little bit. Like Stetson makes some plays too. Like he's thrown to Gossam
He's a
guys,
very
but
he's a mobile guy for sure. I just watch him play, and I'm like, he's throwing to just absolutely dominant athletes in a scheme that's just perfect for him.
no, true.
Um,
But
so we don't
okay,
have
I
to we
saw
don't
this
have to
tweet
dive
from.
into a stat debate, but go ahead, go ahead.
So I saw a tweet from Tom Fornelli, Cover Three podcast. I recommend everyone listen to that show. He said some of you aren't going to like to hear this, but Stetson Bennett will be in the NFL next year, and I kind of agree. Like he won't get drafted high, but I think he's proven enough at college. I mean, especially like he'll play in the NFL, but like he'll play in the Week 18 games where like they have to get the backup in type of thing. I don't think he's saying he's going to be a starter, but I think a lot of college
No,
football fans don't give Stetson enough credit, even though of course, he's throwing to all these great players. I get that. Like,
you have to give him credit. I will give him credit right now. All that I'm saying is he's not. You're looking at a guy who has now won 2 national championships. He's won the offensive MVP of both of these national championships, right? He
Yeah.
he was a Heisman finalist this year. All of these things. But look at the guys he was sharing that stage with, right? You're
For
looking
sure.
at CJ Stroud, you're looking at Max Duggan, who might be a less prominent example, but even Bryce Young, who has won the
For
Heisman,
sure. For
guys
sure.
like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I agree. I think Stetson Bennett is going to be a huge beneficiary of what we've seen level, especially this season with the Brock Purdy story. I think he's absolutely going to get an opportunity to go play somewhere, whether that's a very late pick, whether that's, undrafted free agent makes a roster, that sort of thing. I think he will have a chance to make an NFL roster, definitely. I'm just looking at the element of this where if you put a guy in the right situation, with the right support. I was listening to Kirk Herbstreit last night talk about how it's pretty funny how Kirby Smart and his name's escaping me, but the offensive coordinator of Georgia,
Todd Monken.
yeah, how they both just like publicly talk about how Stetson Bennett needs to step up and Stetson Bennett isn't
True.
doing enough. And they're clearly doing that. And Kirk Herbstreit was the one who mentioned this, but they're clearly doing that because they know it makes him mad. Like they don't really believe that. They're just kind of poking the bear a little bit. Like they know
Yeah.
how to get the best out of him, and that's what they're doing. So when you tap into a quarterback's skill set, put him in the position to succeed, know how to tap into that talent and get the best out of him, very special things can happen. It obviously helps if you're a 5-star factory and your backups are
Of course.
more dominant than TCU starters. That helps. But having a guy who can execute your offense at a high level, which is obviously what Stetson Bennett did, is a huge plus. And I'm very excited to see how Kenny Dillingham, assuming Drew Pine wins the job, who knows what happens. I'm operating under that assumption.
Right. Right.
But I'm very excited to see, based on what I saw with Bo Nix last year at Oregon, what Kenny Dillingham can do with Drew Pine in this system.
For sure. Well, yeah, good way to bring it back. But I think one thing with Bennett is like I feel like he's a great he's so good for debates because
Yeah,
you
that's
see him and he
true.
doesn't
He's a
have the
polarizing guy. He's a
yeah,
polarizing guy.
you see him and he doesn't have the frame and the walk on and all this and what I would say is even last year I think this year's Stetson Bennett is so much better than last year's Stetson Bennett.
I would agree
Granted
with that.
their defense isn't as good as it was last year, but anyway. It's an interesting debate, and yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, yeah, just to bring it full circle, like
He wasn't
if
even the week 1 starter last season, right?
no, it
Yeah,
was JT Daniels.
this is his first full season as the starter, so that's another
Yeah,
layer
that's
to
weird when
this.
you think about it like that.
And he's
Um,
25 years old.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, Drew Pine. The thing with Drew Pine that it's not so much that I like, but that Dillingham must like. I mean, Dillingham isn't going to bring guys in he doesn't think he can win with. I mean. Granted, that sounds obvious. It is obvious, but I remember listening to a Dillingham interview quote, something along those lines, shortly after he was hired, and um, someone asked him like what the job of a quarterback is, and he basically said just to move the ball downfield and to get first downs. And with what that tells me is he doesn't have the same exact offense for every quarterback, Like with Bo Nix last year, they
Yeah.
were running a lot. I doubt really any of these quarterbacks, whether it's Bourget or Conover or Drew Pine or Bennett Meredith or whoever that's currently on the roster, they're not going to be dialing a ton of zone reads. They'll do some, of course, because it's college football. But I think that's such a good way to think about it. It's not like, hey, we're gonna you're going to, run this system to perfection. It's my system and here's how you do it. It's, hey, let's attack the zone or what. I mean, I don't even have the football
Let's build
knowledge
a
to
system
correctly
together
articulate.
that maximizes your strengths.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Yeah.
essentially what he's going to do.
Well, in Dillingham, another interview, I heard him, he was originally apparently he played defense in high school. He was like a linebacker.
Yeah, he played at Chaparral,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
And
is where
so,
Anthony Lucas went.
yeah. Uh, I don't think Anthony Lucas is coming to ASU,
No,
sadly.
probably not.
going to USC. But you know what? I want to talk about that real quick. But the thing with Dillingham, in terms of, he teaches offense through, like, here's how the defense is trying to attack you, and here's how you can exploit them. And I think that's a good way to learn it. It's like, just reverse engineering it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a refreshing outlook too, to not just be like, get into this system and run it to perfection, but sort of tailoring it around that guy and maximizing what they do well in the system. It's sort of like both parties kind of giving a little bit, which is refreshing, a refreshing approach to it.
And for Drew Pine, that'll be a lot of like quick, short passes and accurate routes,
intermediate stuff, definitely.
And as long as you have a coach that like knows this is what we're doing, then it could be able to work. We've seen a lot of unimpressively, like, in terms of just like physical tools, quarterbacks succeed in college football and the NFL. So, we'll see how that plays out. Who knows? Maybe it'll be some transfer quarterback that's coming in that we don't even know about. So, but you mentioned Anthony Lucas. For those of you who don't know, he's defensive end or defensive lineman, went to Chaparral, 4-star recruit, huge recruit, went to Texas A&M, and he's transferring. And he was reportedly, I think Gambo at 98.7 reported this, that he was at a ASU hockey game. That might have been Cartman. I'll have to. One of those two reported that he was at an ASU hockey game. They had him on campus, but it looks like he's going to go to USC. And my point with this is, I'm just happy that like we were in the mix, like legitimately in the mix. So, and my point with that is, at least like it shows the staff is grinding, because I don't think, if this was even 2 years ago before all the scandals hit, I don't think the Herm Edwards staff is doing this. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I'll give you credit this time, Mark. I don't think you're wrong.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Anthony Lucas kind of flirtation?
It's interesting. This is the thing that stood out to me is they took him to an ASU hockey game, and which of these schools has a D1 hockey program that you can take recruits to go watch?
Right.
Not that that's really going to sway anybody, but it's just interesting. It's an interesting wrinkle to this. Take him over to the mullet, show him the mullet. He can go, if he's a big Coyotes fan, he can go catch an NHL hockey game on campus. Where else can you do that? But yeah, it's good that he was even on campus. It's good that they even took a shot at this, regardless of how likely it was or unlikely it was. Obviously, he's probably going to pick USC, which makes sense. USC is now what seems to be a national powerhouse again. So, just to be in the mix, like you said, you kind of mentioned it when you were talking about this, just to be in the mix on a guy like Anthony Lucas, a 5-star last year. It just goes to show you how deep these Arizona ties really are. And it also kind of sucks to see just how long ASU has kind of ignored this Arizona pipeline and how often or how long this Arizona pipeline has kind of been on the back burner. But it's good that ASU is kind of reasserting itself on the local landscape and going after these guys with local ties. Quite a few of them have committed to transfer to ASU, which is a great sign.
Exactly.
Hopefully, once this uncertainty with this, and I don't know how big of a role it plays. Obviously, this is all speculation. Once this investigation is behind us, who knows how much noise they're going to make on the local level. But it seems like they're going to be in the mix on these guys finally, hopefully. That's my hope, is that this shows that in the next couple of years there's going to be 4 and 5 stars in Arizona who decide to go to ASU again, which is, it seemed like that was Dillingham's big goal to begin with, which was the most refreshing part about it. But just to see guys like Anthony Lucas on campus and checking out some premier West Coast hockey is refreshing.
Yeah. Well, and hey, it already worked with Bram Walden. That's another example. And then one
Exactly.
thing,
There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that are
yeah,
at least considering it, and that number is just going to grow. It's going to grow beyond solely transfers who decided not to go to ASU and then thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll do this. They're going to decide to come to ASU the first time around when their future isn't in jeopardy because of a NCAA investigation that limits them from going to bowl games or whatever it is.
right.
Right. Once that's over, who knows what's going to happen on this level? But this is a very positive sign.
100%. And one thing I wanted to clear up, it was officially Chris Cartman who reported that he was at the hockey game. Just wanted to clear that up. But the other thing is not only there's the NCAA investigation, ASU went 3-9 last year. And so and they were bad. So that's another thing. Like if you're a recruit, you're like, yeah, sure, we have this new guy Dillingham, but ultimately I may still be on a bad team. And I can't blame them for thinking that. Like the last thing we saw was ASU go 3-9. But imagine, like, let's just
It
say a
didn't
year
stop
from now.
Colorado.
Yeah, but we don't. Dillingham is not as big of a name as Dion. Like that's
I
just how
guess
it
that's
is.
true. I guess that's true.
But the other thing is, like, what if ASU goes 7-5 next year, and the investigation we at least have the finality of it a year from now. That could only help Dillingham's prowess, in that sense, especially with offensive players. So that's kind of where I'm at on this episode. I'm sure by the time this comes out, Lucas will have committed elsewhere. I did want to talk about some other guys leaving. So Connor Sewelli left, going to Oregon. Joe Moore left to Washington, but apparently he's no longer coming there. So there's a chance he could come back, another defensive lineman. And then this was, I think this was yesterday. Garen Stansberry, another defensive lineman from ASU, has withdrawn his name from the transfer portal. So we've had a few defensive linemen test the waters of the portal and decide to come back. Who knows why? But it's good, just like I mentioned earlier, just to have linemen coming back on the team, even if they're not, game wreckers per se.
Right, you are, Mark. I can't disagree with that assessment.
All right. Well, Colton, you got anything else to add as we wrap up episode 25?
Not really. You got any more gun to your head scenarios for me?
Okay. Gun to your head. You can pick ASU men's basketball to win a championship or ASU football.
I think the road to winning a college basketball championship is one of the most exhilarating things. Going through that entire tournament and winning it would be unreal. Obviously, winning a football national championship would be incredible. That just seems like
it seems much less
so unlikely though that it's not even something that I can even wrap my head around.
Yeah.
So I think I would go basketball. I think you still used this scenario wrong.
I did,
but
but
that's
it was literally on
okay.
the top of my
That's
head.
that's
So.
par for the course. No, that's all right. I understood what you were saying. I think I'm going basketball just because watching that from start to finish would be just exhilarating.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
and it seems likely. Like it's not likely.
more
I
likely than
misspoke.
football.
I misspoke. Yeah. It seems at the very least remotely plausible.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's I put it a little better that second time.
Yeah, no, I totally. I would pick football, but you're right about the fact that like it just feels like that's with all that it takes to win a football national championship. Like there's just more players, and so therefore more weaknesses to improve on that other teams don't have. And the thing with the funniest thing with basketball is if ASU won a national championship, and again, this is complete fantasy land that we're talking about here, so let's just acknowledge that. But to have the exact same national championships in basketball as U of A when we're not a basketball school would be pretty funny. But
that would be wild.
Yeah, and the thing with basketball is like Texas Tech made the championship game a few years ago. Baylor won the championship game.
Yeah.
Don't hire Chris Beard, Ace. Don't go that route again.
No, let's stay away from that. But it's you see it all the time. Look at UCLA made a run to the Final Four when they were in the first four game.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? They were a miraculous Jalen Suggs shot away from the national championship.
Yeah. Well,
It can happen in basketball.
right.
In football, it's like your destiny is almost in the hands of others unless you win out.
Well, and also like it kind of does happen in football. It happened last night, and that's that's the result.
That's what you have waiting for you. That's what you have
Yeah.
waiting for you is an absolute juggernaut SEC team that is going to beat you by 50 points.
Yeah. Whereas
when
in
you get to
basketball,
that
like
stage.
you could just catch a team that has a bad shooting night or something, foul trouble, whatever it may be, and yeah. So
I just hope this ASU team makes the tournament.
I think they will.
I hope they're good enough to get there. At the very least, it looks like they're going to be, I don't know what, like a top 5 or 6 seed in the Pac-12 tournament at the
In the
very
Pac-12.
least.
I mean, they better be a top 4 seed in the Pac-12 tournament.
That's what I'm thinking. Their conference record, they have one loss in conference, and that's U of A, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they've lost any other game. So
no, we're third in
I'm
conference
hoping
behind UCLA and Utah because U of A has lost twice in conference already.
Okay, well that's perfect. So hopefully this team makes the tournament and we can at the very least watch an ASU basketball tournament game again. It's been a long time. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Hopefully it happens.
Yeah, man. They're a fun team and they got a big sweep over the weekend. Going up to Oregon schools. I mean, I would hope for a sweep in those. I feel like it's going to be tough going on the road, but neither of those teams are good. So who knows? But
yeah, and you know what? To all of our listeners, we'll be out at the Cathedral of Mediocrity next Thursday for the UCLA game. So bring an umbrella because there are storms in the forecast.
Hey, this year it's the Cathedral of Above Average. How's that?
Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll rebrand. We can do that.
2023.
It's better than rebranding it to another bank. How many banks can buy the rights to this arena?
Oh man. Hey, maybe next time it'll be
if you
who knows?
Yeah, if you see us up in the upper decks where we like to toil away during ASU basketball games and you see the Corey Kispert headband.
That's right.
Come up and say hello and tell us how much you tolerate the show.
Yeah, I look exactly like Corey Kispert in terms of height, general attractiveness,
Athletic prowess.
Game. Yeah, so completely similar right here. Well, with that tangent, gonna close out this episode.
Hey, that got us to an hour, Mark. You like that?
Yeah, I know. I didn't even plan on that, but we're committed to giving you guys a professional show. So
we won't. I told you, professional podcaster. We're not gonna sell you short.
We definitely didn't have any audio issues at any point when we tried to record. So
I landed on my feet, Mark. Don't call back to that. We can only call back to your gaffes, not my audio gaffes.
Colton's a cat. He always lands on his feet. So with that, episode 25, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for listening and go Devils.